Our hero stood in the middle of the hall in an abandoned ancient temple, silently looking at each other. Gathering her courage, she said what she had been thinking for a long time, that she wanted him to love her. He tried to guess what kind of love she was talking about now. He liked her, but he didn't want to give her false hope. That wasn't why they were here. When his hand touched her cheek, she thought that this was all she had ever wanted. So that gentle hands would touch her tenderly, and warm embraces would not let go all night long. She so wanted the eyes of a loving man to look at her without stopping. All her life she dreamed of one thing, for someone to truly love her. Unexpectedly, he replied that he also wanted her to truly love him. After a moment's silence, he added, so strongly, that he lost himself completely. At that moment, she wondered why that someone couldn't be him. 2 weeks earlier, she had been walking through her hometown, Bern, which was a port. They called her by name, Veronica, because that was the name of our main character. Her friends suggested celebrating her first birthday since she became an adult. It was very tempting, but she refused. Then the girls began to persuade her. She thought she might go to church first and meet her father, and then meet them. So she said that she agreed, but would come later, and asked them to wait. She went to church, and the girls started talking about how her father hated her. Also, after her mother died, her father lived only for the church, and that Veronica still walks around and smiles as if nothing happened. Her friends felt sorry for her, because they understood that this was all due to a lack of parental love. Veronica continued on her way, and the aunt she met noted her beautiful flowers. She replied that these were her mother's favorites, but perhaps her father would like them too. In response, the woman said that there was nothing good about her father and advised her to get married. She was attracted by the men's talk about red eyes, but the woman reassured the girl. He said that they were talking about the monster Bahamut again, but their village was not in any danger. So there was no point in panicking unnecessarily, but our heroine continued to think about it. She had a bad feeling about such stories, but she hoped for the best. She didn't want to give in to despondency before entering the church, and she threw away bad thoughts. But the memory that when he left in the morning, he didn't even say anything to her, upset her. She wanted to go with him, but as usual, he didn't even pay attention to her. She thought that if she smiled more often and tried harder, her father would definitely notice her. Today was her birthday, and she wanted something good to happen. However, she found it suspicious that the church was somehow too quiet. Veronica thought that perhaps everyone was already inside, and that was why there was no activity on the street. Anticipating a joyful meeting with her father, she opened the heavy door with a smile. And she was stunned. What opened up to her gaze defied any explanation. Our heroine was speechless with horror, and she was ready to faint herself. Her wonderful bouquet fell from her hands and slowly fell into a huge pool of blood. She tried to explain to herself what could have happened here, how it happened, but no logical explanation for the grief of corpses in the church simply came to her mind. There was a glimmer of hope inside that perhaps my father could avoid the fate of the others. Our heroine couldn't immediately force herself to look at who exactly died today. However, there could be no doubt that her father was among those killed and torn to pieces. It was a terrible sight, and she didn't want to believe her eyes. But it was him. His mutilated and tortured body lay among the others, and he was dead. The sobs shook her entire body and echoed under the vaults of the sacred place. Tears were streaming from her eyes, and she didn't even try to stop them. She was grieving. But the unexpected touch frightened her, and she slowly turned her head. Horror made her freeze right in this uncomfortable position. She could not move. Veronica began to stutter his name, but she found it impossible. Although she knew for sure that this monster with red eyes was none other than Bahamut, he slowly leaned towards her, and she instinctively crawled back a little. She saw her frightened face reflected in his fiery red eyes. His touch on her skin sent a small shiver through her entire body. Without realizing what was happening, our heroine mumbled a quiet "save me." In an instant, the mood in the city changed, and the sad news spread. Our hero was the first to arrive at the scene and walked inside. The picture he saw spoke for itself. All the people in the church were dead. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to a girl in the far corner. It seemed to him that she was breathing. He came closer to check his suspicion and was right. Then our hero reported that there was a survivor here and was going to help her get up. She opened her eyes, and he immediately noticed the changed color of her iris. The girl was looking straight at him, but this did not make him happy. He knew what it meant. Our heroine had a strange feeling. She couldn't yet understand what it was. Whether it's a dream or reality, she goes out into the street, and people there carefully move away from her. She continues to walk towards them, but their cries surprise and irritate her. What's going on? The girl thought. I'm smiling and everyone still loves me. After a short period of reflection, people start to run away in panic. The crazy screams of people are deafening. It is difficult for her to think. Everything is beyond her understanding. Trying to figure out what's going on, she shouts after them to explain their panic. A man nearby begs her to spare him and calls her a monster. The same thought keeps pounding in her head. Why is everyone abandoning her? Because she is drawn to people. And why did he call her a monster? She was never a monster. She was a girl. To make sure, she looked at her reflection in the shop window and was horrified. She wondered what it was. Maybe it was just a dream, since she was in church. Convincing herself that it was a nightmare, she wanted to get up. But her body did not obey her. Everything was blurry before her eyes. She felt unwell. She was burning up, and she wanted to drink. Gathering her strength, she raised herself up and felt that she could drink the bucket. But when I saw the blood, I realized that it was much more attractive than ordinary water. Her whole being was drawn towards that red substance on the floor with an inexorable force. Pulling herself closer, she thought that this was what she really needed right now. Here it is, the very thing that her body desires, and there is nothing more desirable in this world. A sharp pain stopped her, but she was not going to give up. She continued to stretch. But someone held her tightly, and she couldn't move. And then she heard his voice. The man said that, as he expected, she was fused with the monster. She had difficulty moving her head, but rolling her eyes, she angrily asked who he was. She demanded to be let go, but all she heard was the question of why she wanted to drink it so much. Continuing to hold her, he said that even if he drank, she would feel thirsty. He then added that she would die of thirst, or because her head would simply explode. One way or another, she would die, he said, and she only demanded that he let her go immediately. However, his unexpected question about whether she wanted to live made her think. He asked her if she wanted to live, even if she had to go through hellfire. Our hero demanded her answer, because if she wanted to die, he would kill her without pain. She thought it was rather strange to ask a person whether he wanted to continue living. She always wanted it, even when the neighbors whispered that her mother got sick after giving birth. The children felt sorry for her because she had simply devoured all the life force from her mother, and her father kept telling her every day that she should die, but she wanted to live. Our heroine swallowed and answered honestly that she never wanted to die. She repeated this phrase several more times. It came from the very depths of her heart. It had never occurred to her before that she might be faced with such a choice. Although she did it constantly and always chose life, our hero understood her feelings. He stroked her short hair tenderly and said it was a good choice. Getting closer to her face, he said that he congratulated her on her transformation into a monster. Without giving her a second to think, the stranger quickly pressed his lips to hers. She thought it was a good feeling, and most importantly, she felt her thirst recede. And although the girl had no idea who this person was, she simply gave in to these feelings. With every breath, she felt better, and she thought that he was like a god who saved her. When he pulled away, she looked into his eyes, still tasting his lips. However, she was worried about what was happening to her and what he had actually done. After a little hesitation, she finally asked about it, and he calmly replied that he had saved her. But now she is a monster, and our heroine tried to understand this terrible truth. She wanted to question him, but he stopped her, saying that they had little time. Throwing his cloak over her, he explained that she should listen carefully, and this was important. She merged with the monster Bahamut, and such a person dies if he does not have holy power. These words horrified her. She needed more intelligible explanations, and she demanded them. And while he was choosing his words, she looked behind her and remembered what had happened today. The girl clearly remembered that she followed her father to church, and when she entered, she discovered this. The stranger shook her by the shoulder and asked her to put aside unnecessary thoughts for a while. When her attention was captured, he added that she should listen only to him. Voices were heard from the street. Someone said they were not criminals, and another demanded that they shut up. The deputy commander ordered to search for all survivors and not to miss anyone. His name was Philip von Pittelsbach, and he belonged to the Holy Order. The guard stood at attention in front of him and asked what to do if they found him fused with the monster. Sir Philip replied that such a person is considered a heretic who has betrayed God and is killed on the spot. Our heroes continued to hide in the church. He thought that it was not time to go out yet. However, sooner or later it would have to be done, so he thought about a plan. Veronica was quite far from this holy war and knew very little about it. But the news that the one who merged with the monster was killed immediately shocked her. She continued to think about it, but the stranger had already found a way out of the situation. With a quick movement, picking her up in his arms, he began to walk straight towards the knights. When she asked him what he was doing, he asked her to shut up and close her eyes. And then he added more softly, if she doesn't want him to destroy the life he saved. On the street, the deputy commander listened to the report that no one else had been found. Then he asked whether it was worth looking at the church, but our hero had already answered that there was no one there. With a completely unperturbed look, he approached Sir Philip and said that they had waited. He was not very happy about this meeting, but he greeted Sir Berg. Our hero looked at the tied-up city dwellers and asked what was going on. He replied that this was a normal merger check procedure and asked not to pay attention. Sir Berg did not approve of such harsh methods of dealing with the surviving townspeople. As he was leaving, he started talking about how strange it was when a deputy didn't know the signs of the person he had leaked. But the Holy Order should be aware that those fused with the monster have red eyes. The girl remembered her reflection and wondered what color her eyes were now. Sir Berg said that in that case there was no point in handing over the deputy's post, to which Sir Philip advised him not to imagine that Leon Berg had handed over this position to him, causally reminding him that he was not his equal to begin with. And then on top of that, he ran away, reminding our hero of how he abandoned his knights and turned away from God. It was unnecessary, Sir Leon remembered that day well, but he saw no other way out then. Perhaps in another situation, he would have continued the conversation on this topic, but not today. He needed to get out and take with him the girl who had merged with the monster. Veronica now knew who her companion was, but she flinched when asked who she was. Our hero hoped to avoid this question and did not prepare, but he quickly found his bearings and, smiling slyly, asked him what he thought. And in a serious tone, he continued, "What difference does it make? Let the fallen son lie with a woman." And then he rolls further into the abyss, because now God will not tell him anything. He pressed himself slightly cheekily against his companion and achieved the desired result. The knight was furious. He shouted, "How can one who gave himself to God indulge in pleasures?" This was exactly the effect our hero was waiting for. Now he could leave. To leave himself and carry away the girl, who could be sentenced to a quick death. Sir Philip, in his anger, also blurted out that God would never forgive Leon Berg. After some time, they safely reached the nearest inn. She demanded that he let her go, and he asked, hurt, why she was talking to him like that. He saved her twice today, and she treats him like a hardened criminal. The girl asked him if he was Leon Berg, and he only replied that he was a Bahamut hunter. Veronica listed his characteristics and said that even a 3-year-old child knows who he is. Ignoring this, he asked if she even knew who this monster was. Disparate stories about Bahamut floated through her mind. He was a demon, a devil, a monster. One day he came into this world, or perhaps it is a punishment for human arrogance. The women said that this disaster befell only the heretics in the far south. It was also said that the Order of Knights was still holding back the monster, and they had nothing to fear. Her hometown of Bern was a safe place beloved by the gods, but now it is under attack. The only conclusion she could draw was that God had abandoned them. Sir Leon distracted her from her thoughts. He decided to tell her everything she needed to know about the monster. He said that Bahamut has a rare chance of spawning monster fusions. If a person does not have holy power and emerges, then his mind connects with Bahamut. But soon he goes crazy and dies, and in order to survive, he needs to replenish his holy power. After listening to this explanation, I remembered the relief I felt at that moment. He continued that she was still alive, but she interrupted him by asking why. This question stumped him. He couldn't quite grasp the train of her thoughts. Veronica explained that he was a hunter, and those knights said that all the merged ones needed to be killed. So why did he leave her alive? It took him a little while to answer. The day he first encountered the monster was still so vivid in his memory. Bahamut was impressive, moving quickly and smoothly at the same time. The knight remembered that he looked at the monster as if enchanted and could not look away. He remembered the fiery red eyes of the monster and did not notice how it came close. He was so immersed in his memories that he completely forgot about her presence. When he came to, he said that she herself asked for it and he fulfilled her request. Choosing each word carefully, our hero said that he believed in her. She believes that she is the only one who can put an end to this disaster. The girl looked at him with wide eyes and could not believe her ears. Why her? That's why she said that she had never held a sword in her life, and that she was far from such a great deed. He somehow answered quite calmly that in general, he had asked her to do something great. Smiling, he added that he was asking her to do only what he told her to do. Sir Leon began to explain that Bahamut reproduces by laying eggs. To do this, he eats human brains, and, having eaten one city, he puts aside enough for the whole city. The same thing happens with the state, and if you kill one, all of his descendants die. He came to the hypothesis that perhaps all the monsters that swept the south came from one. Our hero started talking about how if they killed this first one, the disaster would stop. The fire crackled merrily in the fireplace, but it did not give our heroine confidence. She asked in a barely audible voice to explain to her what all this had to do with her. Realizing he needed to clarify his point, he said that she had seen Bahamut. He said that she had previously said that she had seen a monster, so he asked her to describe it. Veronica mumbled something. Then he said that the monster was headless, but had an eye in its chest. This description did not at all fit what she saw. It was all over her head. She concentrated to reconstruct the exact image of the monster in her memory. Then she said that the Bahamut she saw definitely had a head. Our hero replied that everything was correct. The monster she saw was the first one. And if his hypothesis is correct, then she is the only person merged with the original. He would like her to go with him and tell him about the visions she saw. She wouldn't have to hold the sword, and she asked if he wanted to use her as a tool, realizing exactly how he was going to take advantage of her presence next to him. That's why she said that it wasn't her that was needed, but her eyes, to which he noted that she wasn't stupid. She didn't really like this approach, and she also didn't really trust this knight. She asked where the evidence was that she had merged with the original monster. How can she believe without evidence, especially since Leon Berg tells her about it? A man who entered the Holy Order while still a commoner and not a nobleman. He received the sacred sword at a very young age and became an unrivaled knight. A knight obsessed with blood, a priest who betrayed God, who gave herself over to vices. There were all sorts of rumors about him, and getting involved with him didn't bode well, so she didn't want him to use her, so she said she wouldn't go with him. Our heroine thanked him for saving her, but said that she was not on the same path with him. She really had no desire to act in concert with him. As soon as she expressed her opinion, she felt her heart pounding. She was getting worse and worse. She was ready to scream in horror, but she couldn't. Sir Leon watched silently as his companion slowly sank to the floor. He waited until the last moment and did not interfere. She had to feel this pain. Breaking his silence, he said that he seemed to have forgotten to mention one detail. She couldn't refuse. These words were like a bolt from the blue for her. He explained that either her head would explode or she would go with him. She had two choices. But at the same time, he didn't want to pressure her, so he asked if she needed proof. Veronica really wanted to understand what exactly was going to happen to her. When he drew his sword and swung it, she became frightened and asked him to wait. She was afraid that he might change his mind and just kill her, as he did to others. Her heart sank as his sword struck the floor next to her with a clang. Leon asked what proof that if she didn't go with him, she would die anyway. The girl was very angry with him. She didn't want to be used like that. She said that he should protect the weak and not threaten or kidnap them. He looked closely into her red eyes and said, "It seems she didn't understand. Since yesterday, everything has changed radically. Now she is no longer a weak girl. Now she is Bahamut, a bloodthirsty creature that devours people. She thought that God was no more, and the man who saved her instead of the disappeared God was not God." Sir Berg said that she wanted to live, so she sent him to hell. He didn't pay attention to her words. At that moment, he needed to give her his strength. In fact, he knew more than he could say. He needed her to go with him. The next morning, they were getting ready to leave, and he was still able to convince the girl. The knight reminded that, as he had said yesterday, all he wanted from her was a simple thing. From now on, as soon as she starts hallucinating or something strange. But he didn't finish, because speaking into the void made no sense. Realizing that she was not nearby, he looked around. Her lonely figure was visible nearby. She stood and looked at the destroyed city behind her and wondered what to do. What can you do in a situation like this, when the world is collapsing right before your eyes? She felt so sad at heart that she didn't even notice the piercing cold. He was not callous by nature, although in this world he was used to hiding his feelings, but now he simply could not act differently. He was driven by commercialism. Veronica quipped that he was trying so hard for the monster that he didn't let him freeze. Adjusting his cloak on her shoulder, he confirmed her words that she was a monster. Then he honestly added that he needed her, so it was forced kindness. Looking after him, our heroine thought about his words about necessity. She thought that whatever his intentions, he still needed her. Reluctantly, Veronica came to the conclusion that she had to use this to survive. After all, only while she is alive does she have any chance of changing anything. After a few days of their journey together, our heroine saw the city. After thinking for a moment, she assumed that it was most likely Asseldorf. This city was not far from her native Bern, and was just in this direction. Arriving at the inn, her companion said that they would stop there for one night. Once inside, he reported that there was chaos in the city due to refugees and advised not to go out. She wasn't looking forward to going for a walk, but she smelled a very strong odor. She was curious about where it was coming from and what it reminded her of. Then she realized it was the smell of blood. He was so attractive that she was ready to follow him anywhere. She shuddered at his sudden touch, but he didn't guess what was wrong with her. He brought her some ointment to heal the wound and advised her to rub it in thoroughly. Then he said that the holy power he gave her was only needed to maintain her mind, and it doesn't help with injuries. At that moment, she remembered the method of transmitting power. They had been together for several days already, and she still didn't understand what he was thinking. The first few days, the night was so frightening that she tried not to communicate with him, and even though his actions were dictated by necessity, he behaved with dignity. He didn't forget to ask if she was hungry and was interested in her well-being. On the first night, he gave her the only sleeping bag he had available. She felt so uncomfortable at that moment because of his concern, but he did not accept her objection. Moreover, when she tried to refuse, he explained in detail what she needed to take. She had been watching Leon for several days, and now she wanted to figure it out. As far as she could tell, this was all too much for forced kindness. From the experience of my elders, I knew that when a man is too polite, suspect his intentions, and that they are much more cunning than women, so our heroine will ask him now. I decided to start with a simple question and asked, because they shouldn't sleep in the same bed. Veronica was determined and couldn't wait to sort out their relationship. His palm lightly drummed on the bed, and his eyes narrowed a little. He smiled. Then he slyly asked, since they had already kissed, and wouldn't it be logical to sleep together? This answer stunned the girl. She didn't know that priests were allowed to do this. She said out loud that they even kissed a few times out of necessity. Without changing his tone, he asked if she truly regretted what she had done to the 10-year-old child. His question surprised her, so she replied in amazement that she was already 20 years old. The knight replied that he agreed with her. She really was already a grown girl. She herself was no longer happy that she had called for a frank conversation, but there was no turning back. So she started talking about how they weren't just kissing, he was kissing her back. Leon decided that there was no point in lying, and answered honestly that she was quite to his taste. She became more and more embarrassed by this conversation, but continued. She said that she didn't know that priests, it turns out, have preferences in women. Then he asked if she really didn't know, since half of the bastards in Carta were the children of priests. And although he didn't ask her opinion, she still said that she was disgusted by this behavior. He replied a little sadly that he thought so too. It was disgusting and quite repulsive. Our hero decided it was time to finish, so he said he would go explore the surroundings. When he left, Veronica thought that she hadn't really gotten any answers. He was indeed a very strange man, and she had not yet succeeded in understanding him. Night fell over Asseldorf. A full moon appeared in the sky and illuminated the city. Our heroes slept soundly in the same bed. They were exhausted from the last few days. At first, the girl did not see any dreams. She just snored quietly. She turned over to her other side and saw herself walking along some wide road. There were buildings ahead of her. They sparkled and shimmered. She thought it was a golden city. But our heroine had no intention of going there. She didn't want to go there, so she stopped. There was a rustling sound behind her, then something like someone coughing softly. But what surprised her most was the smell. The man continued to cough up blood. She heard his words about the monster, but that was not what attracted her to this wounded man. Her mind was filled only with his enticing scent, She thought how delicious it was. She couldn't stop herself, because what she needed was already lying at her feet. When she woke up, the girl found herself in bed and began to remember with horror. The girl didn't want to believe it, but she had just eaten a man and didn't wince. Moreover, she continued to feel hunger and thirst, and she had eaten too little. With these carnivorous thoughts, she looked at the man sleeping next to her. At that moment, she could not control her desire, and it was irresistible. All her essence wanted now was to eat a little more to satisfy her hunger. She leaned over such a delicious neck and was ready to sink her teeth into it. Her short hair hung down over the unsuspecting knight of the Holy Order. Veronica's real personality was dozing somewhere in the backyard and did not resist. Fiery lights flashed in her eyes. All she had to do was finish her job. But then her personality stirred, and an inner voice asked what she was doing. Our heroine came to her senses and thought that it couldn't be, because she was not a monster. The realization of what was happening made her feel terribly ashamed, and she was afraid to admit it. However, she still clearly remembered the moment she had dined on a human. Her companion came to her aid. He woke up in time and got his bearings. Having shared his holy power with her, he did not immediately move away from her face. Then, as if nothing had happened, he said that they simply wouldn't let him sleep peacefully. Having calmed down, Veronica said that her heart had been hurting too much, and as strange as it may sound, he believed her, because that was exactly what he had assumed. Leon believed that just a few minutes earlier, she really was Bahamut, who stood on the edge of a cliff, looked at the city, and felt an unbearable hunger, and that the blood of the dying paladin under her feet was so delicious, and that she ate it. Her belief in her words was so great that he decided to convince the girl otherwise. He said that it wasn't her, and that she didn't do anything. It was all the monster's fault. However, she didn't feel any better. Memories from her distant childhood came flooding back to her. They told her it was all her fault, because her mother had been so healthy until she got pregnant. Her father constantly reproached her for his loss, did not allow her to cry and pretend to be pitiful. Leon didn't know the details of her life, but he knew from experience that she needed a kind word. He held her tear-stained palms and asked her not to hold back, but to let it go. It was so strange for our heroine to hear these words right now, and from him too. She had been waiting for this all her life, but she heard it from a stranger, and moreover, a frightening man. But she thought that maybe she should trust him, and he could help. Unable to resist, she asked for his help, explaining that she couldn't bear it any longer otherwise. At that moment, he thought it was his sacred duty to help her, regardless of the benefit. She thought it was like being burned alive, feeling the heat and the trembling air, and of all the things on earth that were left to her, the only thing that was cold was Leon Berg. She clung to him like a straw, because he didn't leave, and she wouldn't leave. This thought made her feel as if they were completely alone in this lost world. When the girl calmed down and became absorbed, he began to reflect on her words. She spoke of the Golden City and the Paladin, which means the holy city of Kart is the final goal. He knew that was where the monster was heading, and that was the worst combination. However, the girl's sleep was restless. She began to mumble, calling for her father. Then, almost incoherently, she uttered a few more names from her past. He didn't want these memories to torment her in her dreams, so he reassured her. Our hero guessed that these people were from her past, and she probably loved them. But he knew, whether they burned or survived, it would still be a tragedy for her. He also knew that no matter what, this girl would have to stay with him. He had already put in too much effort to give up everything now and let her go. He was not allowed to get attached to her, and he tried to stick to this rule. But a small gift in the form of a wonderful dagger will help her in difficult times. Our heroine was extremely surprised by such generosity, because it was a gift. When she asked if he was really giving it to her, he replied that she could return it later. Then he added that he chose this particular dagger because it matched her eyes. But she had completely different associations. The scabbard was the color of her favorite camellias. She told him this, and then added that she had always wanted to have a gun, explaining that she would never have thought that she would receive it under such circumstances. He was a little worried about the wound on her neck, and asked her to rub the ointment in well. He didn't want to discuss her vision from yesterday, so he continued talking about the wound. He said that the medicine needs to be distributed evenly, otherwise it won't work. At that moment, he was so cute that she couldn't hold back and asked, "Doesn't he himself understand that such behavior can confuse other people?" She also said that if he chose the bad guy's line of behavior, then let him stick to it, and that she is not used to such kindness, so she might misunderstand him. Veronica said this completely seriously, so when he snorted, she was taken aback. Moreover, he laughed as if she had told him a bunch of stupid things. Our heroes began to quarrel sweetly, which, of course, attracted the attention of those around them. Leon noticed the elderly couple's smiles, so he changed the subject and offered her something to eat. He assumed she must be hungry because she had used up so much energy. Offended, she replied that if he teased her, she would stop talking to him. She even said that she wouldn't have breakfast at all, and Leon didn't believe her, so he asked again. At that moment, they looked like two offended children, and he decided to rectify the situation. He put aside all his higher goals and said tenderly that this food was especially for her, and if she tries even a piece, it will be the greatest honor for him. She was actually hungry, but she didn't want to give up her position that easily. A thought flashed through her mind, and she decided that it would be better to eat first and think about it later. She liked the food he ordered, so she didn't have to choke on her breakfast. He thought it might be easier to control someone you like. He had long known the truism that lovers are blind to everything else. In the corridor, she noticed a small portrait on the wall and stared at it. Our heroine liked these flowers so much that she simply couldn't pass by. Lost in thought, she didn't notice how the hostess approached and addressed her. The woman said that this was a picture of her daughter and that she looked very much like the guest. She told me that she got married, was pregnant, and lived in Karta, and was very happy, but she complained that it was far away, and she was upset that she couldn't visit her daughter. Veronica didn't remember her mother very well, and said that the woman obviously loved her child. The hostess asked if the man was her husband, but the girl denied it. Having said that it looked too much like love running away, the woman advised not to go far. She spoke heartfeltly about the need to remember parents who love, and I couldn't even imagine what a burning issue I raised with this conversation. But when she saw the girl's face, she realized that she had touched a delicate string in someone else's heart. When she asked if everything was okay, Veronica replied that she also missed her mother. Then the owner began to calm her down and said that tears don't just appear that way. She advised me not to keep everything to myself, then asked where my husband was at such a moment. However, our hero had already approached and heard a fragment of the last phrase to himself. Wiping away her tears, the girl blushed. It seemed to her that she looked vulnerable in front of him. Leon was slightly surprised by the topic being discussed, but did not want to refute the speculation. His plans were to leave the city quietly, and he didn't need any unnecessary conversations. So when the woman took their hands and joined them, he didn't try to dissuade her. He simply listened silently to her advice that they should continue to stick together. But when the girl tried again to deny their marriage, he squeezed her hand tighter. She didn't know what game he was playing, but she decided to do as he wanted now. She couldn't read any clue on his face, but she didn't resist. Still holding her hand, the knight invited them to go to their room. She found the situation a little strange, but she held his hand tighter. When leaving, the hostess said that they would talk again if it worked out, and asked not to cry. Our heroes continued to stand in the middle of the corridor, although it was time for them to get ready. To smooth over the awkward situation, he cheerfully asked since when he became her husband, and how much longer was she going to hold his hand, and she started screaming that everything was wrong. Suddenly, Veronica stopped swearing. She smelled that smell again. He was still somewhere far away, but she clearly felt how they were approaching. The girl's agitated state did not escape his attention. He tensed up. The knight guessed what could be the reason, but still decided to clarify. She replied that she had a strange feeling, and that an unpleasant sensation had come over her. His fears, unfortunately, were justified. It was Bahamut, and he was somewhere close. They walked down the corridor, and as they walked, he came up with a plan that could help them. However, the main question remained: how did this monster get to Asseldorf? He understood that they would hardly be able to leave the city now. They needed to scout out the situation. By the time they left the hotel, the city was already in chaos. People ran around the streets in terror. Some tried to hide, others tried to run away. But there were so many monsters that any attempts to survive were equal to zero. Our heroes have so far managed to stay at some distance from the slaughter. Veronica asked how this could happen, since the city walls were so high. She didn't know how, but she felt how one of the monsters saw her with its eye. I wondered how this could happen, because she hid, and he found her right away. Then she decided to give free rein to her feelings, to listen to them. This turned out to be the right decision, because she was able to figure out their location. Our heroine urgently needed to tell her companion everything, and she pulled him. Then she quickly blurted out that she knew for sure that the monsters had gotten in through the sewers, that she felt that they were coming from the dungeon. Then the knight asked how many of them there were. A lot depended on this, but she couldn't answer this question. She simply didn't know. She tried to guess the amount from the sensations she had felt from Bahamut. She immediately shared with Leon that there were enough of them to fill the city. Without thinking, she stopped and said that it was necessary to inform the order immediately, and only when she said it out loud did she realize what this meant for her. After all, the order will consider the merged people to be traitors to God, and they will be killed on the spot. Then she figured that last time they managed to get out of Bern unnoticed, so she felt there was no other way if they wanted to save Asseldorf. But the knight had other doubts. He was not sure that the order would obey the order. Leon said that it would be too late if they waited for the knights. The problem had to be solved inside the city. Veronica was worried about people's lives, so she asked if he could save them. She looked at the knight imploringly and almost pitifully asked him to save the inhabitants. It went against his main plan, but he was still a knight. It was not an easy decision to make, but he had to try to do his duty. For him, however, her safety remained his first priority, and he ordered her to hide. This morning, she would not have thought that she would be so worried about this strange man. But our heroine believed in the strength of this man and thought that everything would be fine. For some reason, at that moment, she remembered only the best stories about Leon Berg. The knight rushed into this unequal battle, and his sword cut down monsters left and right. As he cleared the nearest alley, he heard soldiers about to check the walls. If the walls were defended, the battle would be won, and there was also an order to raise the drawbridge. Veronica tried to stay away, but couldn't, and helped people. Sensing Bahamut, she sent the villagers in the opposite direction, but he interrupted her. After waiting for the voices to fade away in the distance, Leon caught his breath and sent her to get her things. She resisted. She didn't understand what he was doing, because people needed to be evacuated. But Leon replied that the bridge would soon be raised, and they still didn't know how the monster got inside. He added that the troops inside the city would not be able to cope with this, and they could not stay, because in that case, only death awaits them. The girl could not believe it. She asked what he meant by them abandoning this city and all these people. He replied with a heavy heart that it was simply impossible to save all the people. That one can only make a choice, and he chooses her because he has put too much at stake. After a pause, he added that he understood her feelings like no one else, which is why they were leaving. Veronica was ready to burst into tears at the very thought of them abandoning these people. Then, Leon reminded her that she was obliged to obey his orders unconditionally. Without changing his stern tone, he asked, because he had explained everything to her clearly. She had no arguments to argue with, so she went to carry out his order. The bag turned out to be huge, and she could barely drag it, and she was in a foul mood. Continuing to ponder the future fate of the city, she put her foot down awkwardly. Sprawled on the floor, she cursed her fate and this stupid step. And no matter how upset she was at that moment, she had to hurry. As I got to my feet, I realized that I had twisted my ankle and hit my shoulder painfully. However, she understood that they were waiting for her, so there was no time for self-pity. Veronica knew that Sir Leon was standing outside the hotel, defending alone. She scolded herself for not being able to handle this bag and for hanging around on the stairs. If she's going to survive, then she needs to follow orders and leave the city. It was hard for her to walk on her sore leg, but she overcame the pain and continued on her way. Below, she saw the guests and some workers who remained inside. Our heroine thought that they were probably planning to sit it out behind thick walls, so their question about whether she was going to go outside did not surprise her. The men were reluctant to open the door to let her out, as it was dangerous. She said that they were waiting for her and would leave very quickly so as not to endanger the others. Someone asked if she was the man on the street, and the woman clarified that it was not Leon Berg. When this name was mentioned, one of the guests recommended not to let her out. He pointed to her luggage and said that they wanted to run away. Then there was a murmur. People started talking about how a knight of the Holy Order could abandon them at such a moment and run away. One woman said that she donates so much to this order every week. Then the hostess, who was already familiar to her, approached our heroine and affectionately took her hand. She advised the girl to stay while they were building the wall, because there were more monsters outside. This woman was kind to her, so she was worried about the life of the young lady. She said that the city walls are quite strong, and once the breach is sealed, it will be safe. But Veronica had already heard such assurances, but God's beloved Byrne could not stand it. She decided to warn people, saying that no one had made the hole, but they didn't believe her. Then she reported that the monster entered through the sewers, through the dungeon. Of course, they answered her that such a huge monster could not have gotten through in that way. Realizing she had nothing to counter, she said the city didn't stand a chance. The innkeeper replied that they could not leave based on dubious guesses, and that leaving in this situation is madness, but they will not prevent her from leaving, but they themselves will stay. He explained that the residents trust the thick walls of Azeldorf and said goodbye. She was shocked by this decision, but on the other hand, she had no right to dissuade them. Taking her things, she quietly said that she understood, because everyone makes their own choice. As she reached for the door handle, she thought that someone else had made the choice for her. The hostess wished her a safe departure for the sake of her parents. She couldn't tell this kind woman that she had no choice and no parents, but she was so pleased that a complete stranger was showing such warmth. Stopping at the door, she looked at those remaining and thanked them for their kindness. Our heroine didn't know what awaited her ahead, but she still had hope that these people would survive. Leon Berg told her impatiently that it was time to go, and she slowly trudged along. With such an unstable mood, she looked at her companion and quickened her pace. After all, she was required to follow orders in order to survive, and she offered her hand. And the only chance to survive was now behind her back and advised her to hold on tighter. He said that now they would run from here with all their might and spurred his horse. She closed her eyes, feeling as if her body had been lifted off the ground and then landed with a thud. They jumped over the half-open gate, which crashed closed behind their backs. They managed to escape. She looked back. The huge city walls were diminishing in the distance. She remembered the innkeeper's wife, who had shown her such sympathy. Leon urged the horse on a little slower, and she, suppressing a sob, asked about the fate of the people. But she didn't need his answer, because it was all her fault, because she felt something strange. She said the smell of blood was so real, but decided it wasn't that important. And she should have told him earlier, but he replied that it wouldn't have changed anything. He added that she had merely followed orders, and the decision to leave the city was his decision. Then she realized that Leon Berg had not demanded unconditional obedience by accident. It was not a condition, but an absolution of sins, and he took all responsibility upon himself. To carry it alone, Veronica came to such a disappointing conclusion. She even wanted to unravel the hidden motives that prompted him to make such a sacrifice. At the evening halt, Leon went to explore the area, and the girl stroked the horse. She thanked him for running as fast as he could, and that saved them. I thought sadly that if it weren't for this race, they would still be in Asseldorf. This horse had seemed big and fierce to her at first, but now it seemed so cute. Continuing to stroke his muzzle, she asked Leon, who was wandering nearby, what his name was. He replied that he didn't have a name. Then she asked if she could give it to him. The knight continued to wander warily, but answered her question with a sharp refusal. When she asked why, he replied that he doesn't name things that can die. At this moment, Leon stood with his back to her, so she couldn't see his expression. The girl's hand, stroking the horse, froze, but he continued to blink his huge eyes. That's why our heroine compared them to night stars, and that's how the name for this animal was born. Pressing herself against him, she asked him not to listen to bad words. He would live a long life. I thought to myself about the comforting words people say to others. After all, this is actually what they themselves would like to hear. And it seemed funny to her. As she moved away from the horse, her twisted ankle reminded her of itself with a sharp pain. After carefully examining her small foot, Leon asked when she had managed to get hurt. She replied that when she was dragging the luggage up the steps, and the knight suddenly moved away somewhere. The girl sat there in confusion, not understanding what he was doing, until he returned shortly after. It was strange to see him calmly applying a cold compress to her wound. The knight concluded that it was just a dislocation, and there was no need to apply a splint. But he still advised her not to move too much in the next few days. As the cooling sensation began to ease the swelling in her ankle, she unconsciously gave thanks. Leon raised his head, and their eyes met in the moonlight, streaming from the moon. A little embarrassed, she said that no one had ever done that for her. She added that she had been clumsy since childhood, and often fell, but usually dealt with it herself. Then she started to say that that was why she had this feeling now. But she stopped. Her casual remark caused Leon to sit up, and their eyes met again. Our heroine felt awkward under his intense gaze, and she looked away. To smooth things over, she offered to give him back the cloak that was on her shoulders. He replied that it wouldn't be necessary because he would have to sleep close together to avoid freezing. This statement made the girl freeze. She opened and closed her mouth several times, but she couldn't bring herself to refuse because they had been riding all day in the wind. The dusk was gathering, and it was noticeably colder, and she couldn't overcome her awkwardness. Then she remembered the previous night, so she decided that it was worth discussing it with him. So, hiding her embarrassment, she asked what if she woke up in the middle of the night again. After all, he was very tired, and she would not like to cause him any additional inconvenience. She wasn't sure how long the reboot he'd performed on her brain would last. Leon said that she would not wake up, and she eagerly asked where he could be so sure. He replied that he would prefer that yesterday not be repeated, so measures would be taken. Her breath caught, and she instinctively threw her head back, expecting his kiss. She felt like a moth flying towards a flame, her consciousness floating away. Then the thoughts returned, and they were about the fact that she had an abnormal desire. It is contrary to all common sense, a desire for which it would be better to die. She instinctively guessed that Bahamut's hunger was merely his desire to reproduce, and when this desire was suppressed in one way or another, it began to manifest itself differently. Next to her was a man with abilities superior to those of ordinary people. He constantly filled her with sweet spiritual power, and she wanted to eat him, to possess him. Veronica had an uncontrollable desire for him, and if she couldn't have him, she wanted to die drowning in him. A seductive moan escaped her throat, surprising even herself, and she broke the kiss. Her gaze clouded over, and her hands, clutching her clothes, slowly wrapped around Leon's neck. He pulled her close to him by the waist, and she whined softly, begging for a little more, just a little more. Leon slowly stroked her face and suddenly asked if she had always been like this. Veronica asked him what he meant. He replied that it was probably because of his red eyes. The girl, who had been staring at him, reflexively lowered her eyes as he brought his hand closer. Then he muttered in a hoarse voice that maybe he just liked her face. He thought over his feelings, relying on cold reason, and realized that this was a natural desire. I felt a normal desire for a man, just like anyone else in a similar situation. If this desire is abnormal, it can always be suppressed by an unnatural will. The morning came unexpectedly quickly. It seemed to her that she had just gone to bed, and it was already time to get up. Over a light breakfast, he told her where they were going, and she seethed with surprise. When she asked him if he was by any chance a sectarian, Leon continued to calmly get dressed. Then he replied in a cold tone that they needed to get to the holy city as quickly as possible. And if her vision was true, then Bahamut's ultimate goal is definitely the city of Korth. He went on to say that if they captured Kart, it would no longer be possible to save the continent. Veronica considered the journey through the wasteland to be madness, and it was funny to hear this from the knight. But he had a different opinion, because the wasteland is sacred land, and there is a great temple there. She said she heard that if you just go there, you can get punished. Leon replied that now was not the time to think about it, so let them punish him if they wanted. He interrupted her attempt to bring up further arguments, saying that he had already told her more than once. She just needs to obey him, and he doesn't care about her opinion on this matter. His tone chilled her, as if he had poured a bucket of ice water on her. She again did not understand him. Our heroine needed time to digest everything. She thought he was going too far. She was worried, that's why she spoke out, because if something happened to him, like to a knight. And then she realized that her life depended on him in many ways. Suddenly, he found himself next to her. Holding out his hand to her, he said that he had prepared everything. Still sitting, the girl shook her head and firmly replied that she could stand up on her own. Her self-confidence was admirable, but her clumsiness played a cruel joke. She ended up putting her weight on her injured leg and tripped, almost falling again. In an instant, a strong hand darted forward and managed to grab her around the waist. A cold voice sounded that if she wanted him to lift her up, she should have said so. She, feeling indignant, looked up at his carefree face and closed her mouth. At that moment, mixed feelings of rage and disappointment fought within her. Finally, she quietly muttered that she had actually already asked him not to confuse her, explaining that he had just spoken harshly to her, but now he had suddenly become kind again. She was afraid of losing her heart, so she asked him what he really wanted from her. Having said this, The girl took a step back, which only provoked the knight even more. Leon took a quick step towards her and asked in a naive tone what he wanted. And he himself answered his own question, which he had already told her, and as it seemed to him, more than once. Our hero told her not to run away from him and quietly grabbed her hand. Veronica found herself standing close to him, unable to move her raised arm. He added that, as he had already said, he was not going to let her go, no matter what happened. And whether they cross the desert or descend into hell, he will not stop until he kills it. He said that the situation was depressing and that he needed her to turn the tide of this game. Then he asked if she was still against it, and Veronica's heart began to pound wildly. His voice was so quiet and gentle that it made her white fingers squeeze even tighter. He spoke again as he looked down at her wrist, noting that her pulse was racing. Suddenly, her face flushed, and she pulled her hand away, Leon calmly letting go of it. She said that if that was the reason, then he should have continued to speak rudely. Then, as if spitting through clenched teeth, he was unfair in his persistence. She thought it was unfair. He gave his all to God, but didn't ask her name. If he had behaved as he had on the first day, she would still have found the strength to resist. But instead of threats, he wrapped her in a warm cloak, and she grew tired of this suffocating expectation. Like a chain with a heavy metal ball, preventing you from leaving. Throwing him, let's go. She thought about what to say. He needs her. It was a dishonest move. How to explain to him that after such words, no one in the world will be able to leave. Standing by the horse, she shouted that they needed to cross the wilderness if he wanted to save Cart. And she asked him to hurry, thinking to herself that sometimes her value is determined by others. Before her lay a snowy desert, which they had been crossing for several days. She had already become accustomed to the monotonous daily routine, when one day he announced that the wasteland would soon be here. The rising smoke was clearly visible in these vast expanses of wild nature. Having driven a little closer, Veronica saw that they were not alone in this wilderness. The girl pointed in that direction and drew her companion's attention to the fact that there were people there. As soon as she finished speaking, 3 men appeared out of nowhere and demanded that she stop. Leon pulled on the reins, the horse neighed and stopped, and the girl pressed herself closer to the knight. One of the men, apparently the leader, said that one more step and they would not be able to leave alive. Victoria was scared, because even a knight would find it difficult to resist 3 healthy men, and judging by the number of tents she saw, there could have been more. However, our hero had a slightly different plan. He suggested introducing himself first. He said to himself that he was a guard who had fled from Asseldorf and was heading to Cart with his wife. The name of the city slightly changed the tone of this unexpected conversation. The stranger grinned. Then, he quickly talked with his comrades and approached our heroes with a proposal. He said that it was very successful and invited them to dine together. Already at the improvised table, the man began to talk cheerfully about how it was just luck. They were all racking their brains over how to cross the wasteland to get to this city. Then, he said that his name was Bolund, and they were merchants from Luega, so he was glad to meet them. When our hero said his name was Noah Berg, the girl thought he had decided not to reveal himself. Bolund said thoughtfully that as far as he knew, that was what they called bastards in the Empire, and also orphans. In general, everyone is given such a surname when the origin is unknown. Leon was determined to maintain his incognito until the very end, so he said that he was not an orphan. The fire was burning quite brightly, but Veronica was still shaking like an aspen leaf. A neighbor nearby noticed this, and asking what was cold, offered her a drink to warm up. At her wary look, he added that it was nothing strong, so she could drink it. She extended her hand and began to thank him, but Leon was more experienced in such matters. He couldn't know for sure, but it didn't hurt to be extra careful with strangers. He put his arm around her and informed her in a friendly tone that his wife never drank. The men did not expect such a stunt, but did not insist, so as not to cause conflict. To ease the tense situation, Bolin joked about such a caring husband. The blonde insisted, saying that in Luega there is a tradition of treating guests to alcohol, and as a sign of respect, he asked to take at least a sip. Leon agreed to take one for both of them. He even asked Veronica for permission, for the sake of appearances, and then, having said a toast, drank. Meanwhile, the leader continued to make jokes about his overly jealous husband. The knight continued to patiently play the role of an unlucky newlywed jealous of his wife. Veronica didn't like the jokes, but she didn't think she should talk about it. They had been on the road, so after a hearty lunch, they agreed to a separate tent. The girl fell asleep almost immediately, but the knight began to suffer from a headache, and he began to think. He assumed that something might have been mixed into the drink, and judging by its condition, that was the case. The situation was clearly not easy. He had to decide what was the best course of action. For the first time in several days, she slept so soundly that he did not want to disturb her sleep. So he was thinking whether to take the food and run away, or try to extract more information. She muttered something in her sleep, buried her nose in him, and he made a decision. The best he could do was to play it by ear and let her rest. I decided to clear my head, and at the same time, perhaps I'll be able to find out something. He didn't want to leave her alone, but he just needed to take a walk. Taking up his sword, he told her that she could wait a little, as if she could hear. His head continued to torment him, but he felt uneasy not because of this. Something crunched. He stopped and heard that it was amazing that he was still standing on his feet. Leon didn't even bat an eyelid. He just said that he went out to get rid of the alcohol. Then, he asked that in Luega, it is also customary to get permission to go to the toilet. Bolung replied that it all depended on the person, if he was confident that he could defeat them all. His attention was drawn to the sword, and he added that he might have to ask permission. These pseudo-merchants relied on their numbers, so they behaved insolently and brazenly. The previously noticed weapon appealed to Bolung. He knew the value of such items. But first, it was necessary to remove this berg, and he provocatively said that it was in vain that he left his wife. Our hero was worried about the girl, so he had to finish everything as soon as possible. Veronica woke up with her mouth covered by someone's smelly hand, and it was hard for her to breathe. She tried to break free, but heard that if she made even a sound, she would be killed on the spot. Squinting as much as possible, she recognized the blonde boy who was sitting next to her. Leon was no stranger to fighting people with weapons, and he did it masterfully. He took down several of them without even trying, but their leader was a more experienced swordsman. When the tent came into view, he glanced at it briefly. His rival noticed this and quipped that he still had enough time to worry about his wife. Our hero didn't like the joke, so he grabbed the sword. Then, he replied that his wife had a hard time falling asleep, so it was better not to wake her. Bolung wanted to say something else, but he couldn't. His body fell heavily into the snow. The blonde was in no hurry to do his dirty work. He was playing with his victim. He asked if that guy outside was Leon Berg. The scar, the red hair, and the apocalypse sword. Then he said that this so-called messenger of God dragged the woman into the wasteland. This is ridiculous. Although what can you expect from the Kaizenmirs? They have always been a little out of their minds. He also said that Luega has already been wiped off the face of the earth by Bahamut, but apparently not everyone knows about this yet. They say that God will take care of everything, and people do not need to be afraid in difficult times. That they were hiding information from civilians, then asked why she was silent. To die without knowing anything about the monster, or to have fun with it, isn't it the best choice? That madman delivered his prey to him on a platter. He would take it, and the brothers would take the rest. But she knew that Leon needed her, so he would never leave her so easily. However, waiting for a long time was dangerous for her, and she did not want to just sit and wait for rescue. Her rapist was so careless that he didn't sense any threat, and in vain, she was now, probably, the most dangerous girl who ever walked the earth. Leon was worried about her and hurried as best he could, but it turned out to be not so quick to put everyone to bed. He did not know all the strength she now had, but he trusted in her natural courage. Stopping at the threshold, he caught his breath. There was no longer any reason to worry. Only her sad look at the murdered man made him enter the tent. She asked that he knew from the very beginning that these were not ordinary merchants from Luega. Taking a deep breath, he sat down next to her and said that the merchants hired mercenaries to guard them. Veronica sank into her knees as she spoke, her voice muffled. She asked if this world was so corrupt that it produced such kind of people. In a quiet voice, he replied that people do not change so easily, and it does not matter what kind of world it is. Under no circumstances, the girl asked, and he replied that under no circumstances. Nothing changes, bad people always do bad things, in any era. Veronica thought for a moment, watching the first rays of sun breaking through into the tent. She raised her head and noticed his unusually red hair. Then she asked why. If there were so many bad people around, he never wore a helmet. Playing with the strands of his bangs, she heard the answer that the monster always aimed for the head. Having answered that he knew, she asked why he then exposed his vulnerable spot. Leon said that the first is to die faster, and the second is that he doesn't like it when his head is squeezed. Third, they will rush at him faster. So there are 3 reasons, and she can choose anyone. Shuddering, our heroine replied that this was a suicidal tactic. She turned her gaze to the corpse and looked into its open eyes. She had a strange feeling. She had an overwhelming urge to ask one more question, and Leon gave her permission to ask. His slight smile gave her confidence, and she asked why he bought her a dagger. He replied that when a thief attacks, even a child picks up a knife. It's natural. Veronica explained that this was not the answer. She was wondering if he saw potential in her. She also said that she felt the air around her shake when she killed the guy. She merged with Bahamut, and perhaps this gave her some power she didn't know about. She added that if this is so, if she received this dagger because she can do something, she said that she really wants to learn, and that she really wants to become stronger. The bird breaking its shell to be born is the shearwater ready to survive the winter. Leon looked at her and realized who she reminded him of. She was not made of iron and not strong in spirit. A person who can stand up straight in front of a dead body is a person with an inner emptiness, with a flaw in the emotional part. And this girl reminded him of himself. Once upon a time, many years ago, Leon also tried to fill his inner emptiness. He said out loud that although her chances were slim, it was still worth trying. However, he asked her not to whine that she couldn't. He doesn't like people who give up halfway. He looked at her young face and clearly saw her future, stained with blood. Veronica replied that she wouldn't, that she was much stronger than one might think. The knight didn't argue. He himself felt a certain aura when she first took the dagger. Already on the street, he gave her a sword, and taking it, she noted that it was not that heavy. She also said that in books they write that weapons are hard to hold and all that sort of thing. Continuing to pack, he said that it was fine, and she could carry it with her. She asked again in surprise, and Leon replied that she should not let go of him from now on. Then he jokingly added, even during meals, bathing, so that she would wear it until bedtime. But she wanted to learn how to use this weapon properly, not just have it. She started saying that she needed to know where to hit if she was in a tight spot, but Leon was in a hurry to teach her. He said she wouldn't be able to wave it properly anyway, and she got angry. In her heart, she cursed this unbearable man, but she wanted to prove that she could. She felt a strange and powerful desire rising deep in her chest. As Veronica cut through the air with her sword, her red eyes suddenly flashed. At that moment, the still air around her seemed to be torn apart. Oddly enough, she herself did not expect such an effect. But Leon narrowed his eyes. The girl exclaimed that the air seemed to explode, and he replied that he was not yet blind. Clutching the sword to make it slip away, she stood there for a moment in a daze. She said that she was in shock yesterday and didn't feel it right away, and then she swung again. But no matter how hard she tried, she only managed to make a whistling sound, and she was very disappointed. When asked why it didn't work anymore, the knight replied that he was not like her. He's not leaked, so he can't explain how it all works or doesn't work. To which the girl asked him to be more serious, because he promised to teach her. Her hands were falling off from futile attempts to repeat the effect, but she did not let go of the sword. Leon, anticipating her mood, said that he had only one piece of advice now. He explained that the only option was to first strengthen his physical fitness. I thought sadly that he promised to teach me, but he only gives advice, so my hands drop. Then she thought that if necessary, she would be strong, and she gave him her free hand. If there is a need for it, then she needs to try harder not to let him down. Leon said that she should know that to become a swordsman, one must be in good shape. His words made her think, and then she remembered that she had taken dancing lessons. That's why she told Leon about it, adding that in fact she is physically strong. The knight replied that he thought so, and the girl, to clarify, asked because she was thin. He looked at her, although it seemed to her that he was looking somewhere deep inside himself. With a slight hoarseness in his voice, he replied that he simply didn't, and fell silent again. Veronica continued to look at him, trying to guess what he was thinking about. She couldn't imagine how far back into his childhood memories he had gone. She wanted to bring him out of this stupor. She asked him what was simple. Then he started talking about how she had muscles, despite the fact that she ate little. As she replied that she was quite confident in her body, she saw him laugh. Without waiting for a question, he said that his coordination was so good that he could even twist his ankle. She said that of those who can't, she still copes much better. Leon noticed that the dancers usually had long hair, but the girl had short hair. In response to his remark, she replied that her father always told her that long hair was vulgar. However, she wanted to share that she cuts her own hair and that she is successful. And whatever his memories of his mother, long hair always fascinated him. But he said that it was a pity not only for that reason. He also told his companion that it was crooked in the back. Asking him not to tease her, she looked ahead at the wasteland that opened up before them. It was a completely bare land. Not a single tree or even a blade of grass grew on it. Our heroine had heard about the temple, but she could not even imagine its ancient grandeur. The ruins, which were over 1,000 years old, were surrounded by tall white columns. They created a majestic impression, and she looked at this spectacle, enchanted. Veronica only heard rumors, which turned out to be true. The statue was headless. When she asked if the head had been in place 20 years ago, he asked how old he was. Leon said, "At least 20 years ago, he couldn't have ended up in the wasteland." She became curious as to why he treated her like a child when he himself was not that old. She couldn't tell his age just by looking at him, so she didn't know how much of a difference there was. Ruffling her hair, he asked if she was upset that he was treating her like a child. Growing more and more irritated by his behavior, she abruptly pushed his hand away. At these moments, the girl felt like a capricious child, but she could not restrain herself. Having answered in the affirmative, Veronica looked him straight in the eyes from under her brows. Their eyes met, and Leon wondered why exactly she was offended. Our heroine spoke honestly because she wants him to love her. Her words were devoid of any logic and sounded like a childish whim. While waiting for his answer, she studied his handsome features. They seemed to be carved. Leon asked why she wanted this, but she knew the answer, but wasn't ready to voice it. Then he repeated his question in a more insistent tone, and she hesitated a little. Looking at her feet, Veronica spoke very quietly, as if she were telling a secret. She doesn't know exactly, but at some point, she began to want everyone to love her. But observing those around her, she noticed how happy other people were. And children who are loved by their parents always looked calmer and more carefree. For this reason, she learned to dance, because when she danced, everyone looked at her. Having shared this, the girl fixed her gaze on the stone floor, examining the cracks. After a moment of silence, Leon suddenly replied that he felt the same way. Not understanding what he meant, she looked at him in surprise and asked this question. His voice sounded so deep that it could reach the deepest corner of her soul. She looked at him, fascinated, when he said that he wanted her to love him. And he wants this to such an extent that she loses herself, dissolving in the feeling. His desperate movements, as if begging for attention, reminded her of herself. However, something didn't add up. This man opposite her didn't seem lonely to her. So, embarrassed by the question, she asked if the rumors about him were actually true. The answer to her was a question. Rumors that he had fled the battlefield and abandoned his comrades. Leon continued, finding it increasingly funny that he was down and out and obsessed with women. At this point, our heroine began to waver. Considering him a pious knight, that's why I even asked that it was possible that he even had an illegitimate child. He replied that he might disappoint her, but he had never been with a woman and had no intention of doing so. Then the girl asked, what if he fell in love? Leon replied that, even in that case, said it as if it was obvious that he never intended to fall in love in the first place. She thought of the firm certainty that it wouldn't happen, such devotion to the absolute, as if nothing could ever interfere with a life dedicated to a higher power. Veronica understood this, but for some reason, disappointment filled her soul, and she splashed it out with the question of how he could be so sure that he wouldn't fall in love. How can this be guaranteed? Because you can fall in love in an instant, even into eternal love. She found herself stepping forward without realizing it, tugging at his clothes. The girl said that for some people, it is enough to just meet each other's eyes, and they are immersed in a love that is ready to make them give up everything else. That they fall into the abyss of despair and meet a savior who extends his hand. Then she continued, through the window of their souls, and after a short silence, she summed up. Therefore, she thinks he shouldn't make such categorical statements. Life is long. Having finished expressing her opinion, she pulled her hand back and laughed loudly. When he spoke, his calm, low timbre was in sharp contrast to hers. Leon said that even the fiery love that burns everything cools down in the blink of an eye. And that is why some people, even when they meet the eyes of someone who can become the love of their life. His face was so close as he continued that they passed by without seeming to notice. Therefore, It is better to let go of what you have than to lose everything. Everyone has their own choice. Saying that he didn't think she was too young to understand, he turned and walked away. She sat down near one of the columns and heard him say that he would bring the luggage. Leon stopped at the entrance and thought that this was not even a desert in front of him, but a real wasteland. He smiled sadly. He knew the stories about this desert shrine. It was said that long ago this place was fertile and birds chirped in the trees. God collected all the life energy of this place and gave it to people. The power was immeasurable. The chosen people began to call this power holy, which was passed down through generations. And when someone with such power remains in the desert for a long time, the sacred power leaves him. Our hero had the feeling that he was gradually returning to where he belonged. In recent days, he felt his holy power growing, trying to break free. But he ignored it, driven by necessity. But now he had reached his limit. He was so tired that an uncontrollable surge of holy power awakened memories of that day. The nights he abandoned then would haunt his memories for a long time. Leon Berg found himself back on the Tirana front and heard the voices of the knights of his squad. And although a year had already passed, their cries that they had to retreat still rang in his ears. Even when a direct order came to immediately return to the city of Kart, he did not retreat. The Holy Knight was so filled with killing intent that he did not react. He had no intention of returning until he had torn it apart with his own hands. Then Leon, in a frenzy, absorbed all the holy power of his knights and fell into a rage. The squad trusted their commander implicitly, and no one expected such an ending. Leon Berg ordered everyone to take cover. He was ready to go into this fight alone. With cries that the divine sword had gone out of control, the holy knights fled. Even so, he was unable to stop the monster from crossing the front line and heading north. It was then that he left the battlefield, disobeyed the order to return, and blindly pursued him. Every town he passed was stained with blood, but he continued on his way. Hundreds of his comrades were killed in battle with it, and he was the only survivor. They said that he had completely gone mad, and that he simply could not return to Kart. As if in a fog, the knight heard the girl's words that he looked unwell. It even seemed to him that she had crept up on him, but when he looked up, he realized that this was not so. Veronica shook his shoulder, her concern growing. He was bad. She asked him if he was okay. He automatically replied that he was, but he wasn't sure. It was chilly in the temple, and he wouldn't mind warming up a little next to her. He saw her excitement, but he knew that it would all pass. She just needed to rest a little. However, Veronica did not calm down. She saw him trembling and began to suspect a temperature. Her suspicions were confirmed, so the girl asked how long this had been going on. Then she added that for several days on the way here, she had seen that something was wrong with him. Leon laid his head on her shoulder, and, as he had hoped, Veronica fell silent. For a second, it seemed to him that the power inside him was subsiding, and he relaxed a little. He told her that he would be fine after sleep, and settled more comfortably on her shoulder. Leon felt her breathing quicken and her heart pounding in her chest. It occurred to him that when someone reacted like that, how could he resist making fun of them? To see her excited, how tears well up in her eyes, how she blushes from embarrassment. If he had met her when he was a squire, he would have teased her to tears over and over again. And then, when she starts crying, I would awkwardly apologize and extend my hand in a friendly manner. He smiled and said that he hoped to see her smile back and did not mean to upset her, to change the conversation in some joking manner to something nice and everyday. Perhaps you could even give her a small bouquet of flowers that you pick here. All these scenes flashed before his mind's eye in an instant, and he sighed. Leon himself didn't understand what had come over him. It's better not to even imagine. He felt his tense shoulders relax, and he closed his eyes. Veronica listened to his breathing. It became calmer, but she didn't know if he was sleeping. She wanted to talk to him, so she shrugged her shoulders quietly and asked. When he replied that he was not sleeping, she said that she had thought for a long time and had come to a conclusion. It may sound strange, but he really did often remind her of an ordinary cat. She said he had a terrible temper, but when he got closer, she couldn't push him away. The knight chuckled and replied that he had never in his life been compared to a cat. It was a compliment, she explained hesitantly, then added that she liked cats, and that when she was little, a stray cat would show up at their house every day. However, she couldn't take responsibility for him, so she just fed him sometimes. But before she realized her mistake, the cat was already inside the house. and she realized that she would never be able to stop this stubborn friend from entering. When Leon asked if she had given him a name, our heroine honestly answered that, of course, she had. The knight replied, as soon as she gave him a name, he probably decided that he had become a house cat. Veronica said nothing in response. She thought about his reluctance to give names. She remembered well that they had already raised this topic a few days earlier. But even now, when she knew Leon a little better, she couldn't understand the reasons why. Our heroine fell silent again, her body trembling from time to time from the cold. This did not escape his attention, so he pulled her closer to him to keep them warmer. She was already used to his touch, so she pressed herself against him without resistance. In the silence of the ancient sanctuary, each of our heroes became lost in their thoughts. Leon thought that this naive woman accepting kindness would probably never know. When one Bahamut dies, all the offspring it spawned die in a chain reaction, and the merged people are in some sense also his children, so the same fate awaits them. So when the original Bahamut dies, this woman's life will end as well. Like a camellia falling in full bloom, completely unaware of its death. Veronica had another dream. She found herself in a place that was unfamiliar to her. She was very cold. Instinctively, she pressed herself against Leon, but it didn't help. She muttered that she was freezing, but the knight was too fast asleep to hear. In her dream, our heroine was climbing a snowy mountain and felt a piercing wind. Right in the middle of the snow, there was some unusual mushroom sticking out, and I thought that I had never seen anything like it. Continuing on her way, she didn't even know how long she had been walking or where she was heading. Veronica wondered if this was a dream or not. Everything seemed too clear, but for some unknown reason, she kept going forward, further and further. Having climbed a high mountain, she unexpectedly came across a crack in the slope. The ground suddenly fell out from under her feet, and she began to fall into the resulting hole. The bottom was full of pale crawling creatures, moving like vile worms. Their red eyes sparkled like stars, and overcoming her fear, she came closer. She was able to make out one of the nearest figures. It was a grotesque and frightening sight. Veronica woke up screaming, clutching her chest as if her heart was about to burst out. Gradually, she came to her senses and, having calmed down a little, turned onto her side. Leon slept next to her, but his mere presence was not enough. His scent intoxicated her. The only thing she wanted now was to climb on top of him and press her whole body against him. Every time she saw these terrible visions, she became not herself. She felt humiliated that she had to seek protection from this man again. Out of desperation, the girl, without even trying to wake him up, pressed her lips to his. In those seconds, she was not responsible for her actions. She was driven by a sense of self-preservation. It was the only thing that could save her from the monstrous pain and madness. Leon woke up and immediately said that it seemed like she was having nightmares again. Our heroine needed to tell this before she forgot everything she saw, but she just couldn't do it yet. She wanted his warmth too much, so I gave in to my impulse and threw myself into his hot embrace without delay. Leon stroked his back soothingly, his touch pressing against her soft skin. It was a forbidden pleasure to desecrate the holy temple with lust for the Son of God. Her mind seemed to melt, and desire, like an electric current, penetrated every part of her body. Although she was terrified by the thought that her soul had already completely submitted to the devil, she was still breathing heavily when she muttered the vision in jumbled fragments. Leon said that that mushroom only grows in the Blazon Mountains, where the sacred cart is located. Veronica asked. It turns out that the monster finally settled there, but why didn't it attack? As I said this, I realized that it was a stupid question. But why didn't they attack earlier? The knight answered, because Cart was protected by holy power accumulated over thousands of years, and the infallible prophecies said that the peace and quiet of the holy city would be eternal. Our hero added that not a drop of innocent blood would be shed on this land. Even if the rest of the world collapses, the holy city will stand, for such is God's promise. Her question came out of nowhere. Does he really believe in the existence of God? After a moment of silence, Leon asked if she would believe him if he said yes. She replied that it was possible, and added that who would doubt the answer of the Son of God? Giggling, she said that with such sacred power, it would be strange to deny it. Then Veronica cheerfully asked how he realized that he had power. He knew from birth. And what's great, I guess, is to be born chosen with a destiny and have guaranteed salvation. It was a special life, and growing up, he must have been the center of attention and love. He replied that he had been completely blind, but that his vision had been completely restored overnight. As a child, the woman he called mother cut his eyes with a kitchen knife. She did this because she wanted his face to become closer to that of a god. Veronica could not imagine how such a thing could be done to her own son. If his mother wanted a face like a god so much, she would have done it with her eyes. Leon glanced at the angry girl for a moment, then calmly replied, "Who knows?" And he added that she was already blinded by love, so there was no need for this, that she simply needed to get the attention of his father, the holy knight, at any cost. His mother thought that the respected knight would take care of the child who looked like a god. Our heroine remembered another conversation they had when Leon told her this story. That half of the bastards of the holy city of court are the children of priests. Veronica licked her dry lips, her voice sounding hoarse and tense. She asked, "So his mother managed to achieve what she wanted so much?" He answered, "Not exactly as I planned from start to finish, but the result is not bad." Leon spoke indifferently, as if he were retelling the disappointing ending of a fairy tale. He continued that his father had shown interest, although it was not about him as a child. It was all about his holy power, so he took it away. The girl said she didn't understand. The knight, a little surprised, asked if she didn't understand her biological mother. But the girl replied that she found it strange that he shared such personal things so easily, as if it was nothing, but his family treated him very badly. Almost crying, she added that there is no need to hide emotions, even if it is not sadness. It will be easy at first, but then he will either forget compassion and cease to be human, or one day the sadness he thought he had erased would come crashing down on him and overwhelm him. However, Leon's answer, or everything would simply lose its meaning, made her confused again. Closing his eyelids, he continued that, over time, everything becomes meaningless. He said that it was even funny now, but back then he was enduring pain that was beyond his years, and that for the sake of his mother's love, he endured all this horror that befell him. And now he understands that even if he really wants to, he cannot even remember her face. In a dispassionate voice, Leon continued to tell the story of his life. He said that at the age of 7, he was taken as a page, and at 13, he became a squire. At 19, he knelt before his father and truly considered himself the son of God. And the feeling that she talks about here has long since disappeared without a trace in him. There was no emotion in Leon's voice, as if those wounds no longer bothered him. Suddenly, with a strange face, he asked why she was going to cry. Shaking her head, the girl replied that she was not crying. It was just a habit of hers to cry. Without changing his expression, he asked, "She always tries not to show weakness." Veronica said that as a child she cried a lot, and she did it often and a lot. She would lie on the floor, throw tantrums and kick, and her mother would scold her and sometimes get angry. Leon asked why she was now holding back. She replied that she didn't know, but she didn't tell how her father demanded that she not squeeze out tears. After his mother's death, he scolded her harshly every time she cried loudly. Instead, she said that only crying cicadas are found by children. Also, sometimes it seems to her that the tears she suppressed are accumulating inside. Over time, there will be so many of them that they will gradually rise to eye level. And then she will have nothing left to do but cry for the rest of her life. She said that dying with this sadness inside is like not breathing while you live. The knight noted that there was meaning in her words, and she thought that she was seeing the real him. It's like amputating your entire arm, only because your hand is rotting, so that his heart would not be hungry, and so that he would no longer feel this terrible pain. And our heroine made Leon an unexpected offer to cry for him. His mask cracked, revealing his true face, revealing a very deep abyss. A dizzying sense of danger came over her, as if she were looking into a bottomless well. He kissed her, and she thought his lips were trying to absorb all her sympathy. It was a fierce yet gentle warmth that made you forget the essence of this kiss. Leon said she shouldn't waste her precious life energy for him, and before she could break free, he caught her breath, roughly grabbing her lips. She felt something ignite inside her, letting it burn. The kiss was so greedy, like a starving beast, and it swallowed her whole. She got the impression that he only now remembered why he had kissed her. Leon muttered a verse from the scriptures to her, but she knew the meaning of the words. "I have made a covenant with my eyes. How can I look at a woman now?" An indescribable feeling of anxiety engulfed her entire body, from the very tips of her toes. Looking back, she will think that perhaps it was a premonition of things to come. Pulling away from her, Leon began to act as if nothing had happened. Time is inexorable, and it continues on its way, and our heroes move on. They had traveled from the wasteland to the holy city quite quickly, and now it was ahead. Having stopped his horse, the knight asked his companion if she had seen this city in her vision. She saw him in person for the first time, but she couldn't help but recognize him. They reached Kart. Due to recent incidents, the city gates have been temporarily closed. The guard said that as soon as the situation in the world stabilizes, the entrance will be opened. Until then, he asked everyone who wanted to enter the city to remain calm. Leon, holding out the ring, asked how long it would take to process the pass. Leon's question sounded casual, but the guard's wary look quickly changed. His expression changed completely, and he quickly looked from Leon to the ring. It was the look of a man who saw something incredible and long awaited at the same time. The guard simply could not help but know that it was a ring with the emblem of the Holy Knights. Finally, the guard's gaze fell on the sword on Leon's belt. Holy Apocalypse. Anyone with even a passing knowledge of swords would have recognized it as one of the two. Leon said that he had an item that belonged to His Holiness, and it needed to be returned. Smiling, he added that he would be grateful if you helped him get inside. Half an hour later, our heroes, accompanied by a young knight, approached the palace. Veronica felt as if she had entered a painting. She looked around as if in a daze. Meanwhile, Leon spoke to the escort, saying that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He named him after Oscar Berg, which is probably about 5 years ago now. Oscar replied that he did not expect to be remembered, and that he had been knighted for 4 years. Leon had no intention of hiding his sincere joy for his old friend. The other one was not so friendly. A sparkle flashed in his eyes. Turning his gaze to Veronica, he said that the girl would be escorted to the papal court. Surprised, she asked if they weren't there yet, and received a negative answer. Then, softening slightly, Oscar explained that the papal court was located behind the temple, and when he added that Leon Berg would join her after the audience, she became frightened. She couldn't even imagine that her companion would take this statement so calmly. Leon, without even saying a word to her, headed straight towards the temple, without turning around once. Veronica opened her mouth to call him, but immediately closed it. What should she call him? Either way, it was awkward and weird, and it seemed to reflect the essence of their relationship. After all, if you think about it, they never addressed each other by name. The accompanying knight brought her back to reality, telling her to follow him. Having no choice, the girl followed him, slowly climbing the steps. She thought that she would have to suggest it to Leon in their address to each other. Pope Julius V said that Leon had arrived earlier than he expected, and that not long ago he received his letter, which said that the chosen one had been found. Our hero replied that the city was under attack, which is why he was able to get there so quickly. His Holiness noted with displeasure that his knight had gone through the wasteland. First, he broke his oath of allegiance. Then he left the battlefield and spat on the rules. But he already knew that the burden of guilt on his shoulders could now be counted on one hand. Father, I have sinned against heaven and you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. However, he was ready to accept both excommunication and execution, if only to fulfill his final mission. Therefore, he said proudly, and yet the second Son of God returned to the Holy City. Julius V asked him sarcastically what he should now do to arrange a feast for the prodigal child. The knight, without giving in to emotion, answered, "If they serve him dead Bahamut." His Holiness demanded to know what exactly was meant. The woman had a vision of these creatures multiplying in Blazon, gathering strength, in order to then attack the city of Kart, and Julius worriedly repeated about Blazon. Leon said that she predicted the events in Asseldorf, so we need to start searching. Sir Philip intervened in the conversation, reporting that not all the knights had yet returned from Bern, and until they arrive, there is no point in sending others outside the holy city. However, our hero insisted that this city had been promised eternal peace. Then, he asked if they had ever thought about why the woman was sent here. Leon's words seemed bold, almost daring, and most importantly, blasphemous to the Pope. After pondering what he had heard, he asked, "So the Holy Knight breathed life into Bahamut's daughter. Healing with holy power is prohibited in order to distance oneself from pleasures and carnal desires." Leon said it was necessary. His Holiness asked again. Without waiting for an answer, he asked if the knight was ready to sacrifice her on the altar. Leon expected this, so he bowed his head. One way or another, she was already sentenced. Veronica finally decided to ask if this was really the room where she would live. It's just hard to believe that all the rooms in such a grand building are underground. She had already descended to the lower floors 3 times, accompanied by a guide. He said she was almost there, her room was downstairs, and asked her not to worry. But how can one not worry when even an inexperienced girl could see that this was a prison? The priest added that food would be delivered to her door at the appointed time. As he was leaving, he wished her a good rest and left, leaving her alone. When Leon was freed, it was already deep night, and he had one last thing to do. Oscar said that the purpose of this mission was to find traces of the monster, and they had already sent a squad. Unfortunately, he never returned, so we'll have to check in that area first. Out of place, our hero asked. What was more important to him was why Oscar was following him all day. The answer was that His Holiness ordered it, so it was supervision, Leon said. Oscar replied that only within the Holy See he would not go on a mission with him. Then, our hero noticed that he apparently enjoyed special favor, so much so that His Holiness does not send people to dangerous places. In response, the young knight said that he did not care about his master's true intentions. Openly demonstrating his dislike for his interlocutor, he added that he was only a servant. However, Leon did not focus on this because he was breaking his vows. Then he knew that a child born with the surname Berg was obliged to seek recognition. He despised his brother, who betrayed his father and spent his entire life trying to prove his worth. He once, having learned about his holy power, was obsessed with the desire to prove his worth to God. Weak people cannot live without a goal, be it a dream, family, money, or honor. The lock creaked and they came. The room was quiet. It seemed like there was no one inside. Leon was attracted by the lump on the bed. He walked over. Oscar quickly followed him. He sat up slowly and reached for the shuddering blanket, the breathing beneath him growing louder. Oscar shouted something behind him a little belatedly, but it didn't matter anymore. Before he could touch it, the blanket was thrown aside. Flashing red eyes looked at him. The eyes of Bahamut. No, just similar. The sword darted forward like a sharply honed blade, but Veronica stopped in time. She apologized and said that she thought it was a stranger, but Oscar was worried about where she got the weapon from. While the girl was trying to cope with her excitement, our hero replied that he gave it to her. When Oscar called him Sir Berg, the knight asked if the title sounded strange. He grinned and added that this was precisely why he deliberately avoided using it. Leon knew that a serious conversation was coming, and perhaps the last one. So I told Oscar that it might take some time and asked him to leave. Veronica was the first to speak, saying that he had returned later than she had expected. He replied that he had a lot to do and still had to justify himself for crossing the wasteland. Our heroine said very quietly, even for her, that she thought he would not come. When he asked why, she said she thought he was angry with her because of what happened in the wasteland. Having corrected herself, she explained that some awkwardness had appeared in their communication. Then she added that even when he left today, he didn't look in her direction once. Then Leon, smiling, asked if he had any reason to be angry with her. Remembering his face in the temple, the girl replied that it was probably because she looked behind the mask. When he asked again, she explained that this could also be called pretense. Without waiting for any comment from him, she cleared her throat and continued. He said he knew what it was, and knew that people in masks were always afraid of being exposed. She asked tensely that it was because she had crossed the line and it had scared him. The answer was that he was not angry, and that, on the contrary, he should be grateful to her. After all, no one had ever offered to cry for him, and Veronica was even glad. Feeling like he was leaving a mark, the joy quickly gave way to anxiety. She guessed the true state of affairs, but asked why she was locked here. Leon replied that it was not his decision. The papal court believed that she would be safer here. Having said that it was for her own good, she asked why he did not stay with her then. Having explained that he was leaving for Blazon tomorrow to search, he added that she could not go. Veronica felt sad and was about to speak, but he stopped her impulse. It was as if he had just remembered that he needed to finish something before leaving. She felt terrible pain from the realization that this man had not come to see her. It dawned on her why he had come to her so late. He hadn't wanted to take her away from here. He is here only to prevent a possible outbreak of madness and anger. Pushing him away, she thought that tomorrow he would leave for reconnaissance and she would stay here for now. She said out loud that, judging by the past, everything seems to happen the same way. Then she finished the thought that outbursts of rage and hallucinations always come together. so she wonders if she'll be okay if she doesn't see them for now, and that it was precisely because of this that he kept her near him. Then he replied that he had thought about it. Almost touching her lips, he added slightly casually that now it was an order from above. She hadn't experienced anything like this for a long time, but now she remembered how terrible it could be when you need to rely on someone to live, and you have no way to refuse such an order. She thought that when this moment ended, she would be left completely alone again, to sail across the white sea, lulling your soul with fragile hands so that it does not scatter. As soon as their lips parted, she blurted it out. She asked him not to leave. Veronica's breathing was ragged as she forced herself to meet his gaze. It was a plea. Leon looked at her without moving, his head slightly bowed. She thought about what the wasteland had done to them, and involuntarily shuddered, clutching her clothes tighter. The girl, looking down, asked if she could stay with her, at least for tonight. It wasn't a calculated move, just a habit from the nights they spent together. Some scientists have claimed that even time flows strangely in the wilderness, that in certain places, years and even decades can pass unnoticed. Perhaps they spent many years there together, warming each other in the cold, a story that no one but God will remember, something that might not have happened at all. Looking at the bed, Leon suddenly noticed that it was too narrow for two. She replied that no one said they would sleep together. She just asked to stay, and in general, just for today, and she means not to leave her here alone, thinking that nothing bad would happen if he stayed here for a while. They can just talk a little and drink the wine they brought her for dinner. Having told her that he would not leave, he sat down. Veronica was glad, because she had no longer hoped. However, the conversation did not go well. Silence hung in the room, as if it were empty. Leon's memories unconsciously returned to his conversation with His Holiness. These thoughts weighed on him, so he didn't know what he could say to this girl. He couldn't share with her that he might have to sacrifice her, although to some extent he will still be, albeit indirectly, guilty of her death. To cheer both himself and her up, he said that next time he would take her with him. But when he told her to stay here for now, Veronica thought it was a lie. A sweet lie, which is how it should be. Otherwise, no one will believe it. She got angry and said that it meant he wasn't going to leave her alone today. After walking around the room, our heroine realized that her mood needed to be improved somehow. The bold decision came to her mind by itself, but she immediately felt happier in her soul. She made a completely innocent face as she spilled the contents of the bottle on his suit. She didn't care whether he would guess that her actions were deliberate. The main thing was done. Saying that it looked like he would have to wash up and stay here for the night, she handed him a handkerchief. Leon uncovered her plan, but he was even amused by this somewhat childish prank. He said out loud, "Look at this! It seems she really is angry." He understood that this stubborn woman took revenge on him for leaving her for the whole day. He thought that she seemed to be deliberately continuing to press on his most vulnerable points. Her image appeared before his eyes, destroying the world he had so carefully built. It was as if she were looking into the trembling soul of the little boy inside him. Maybe she knew all along that this would happen one day at some point. This nerve-like thing, worn out and weakened in the desert, will finally shed its remains. Something deep inside him will break, and he will be crushed with guilt and betrayal. His hand dropped slowly, as if on impulse. He knew what he was going to do. The hand, immersed in the depths, began to move, the veins bulging seductively. Finally, with a quiet groan, the evidence of his sin shattered across the stone wall. The girl's handkerchief slipped from his weakened fingers and slowly fell to the floor. Inhaling the scent of lust, Leon leaned his back against the cold and hard surface. Veronica sipped the rest of her wine with a bored look and waited for him to return. She asked Leon, before he left, to teach her how to hold a sword. She added that now she does not have time to wait for her physical fitness to improve. She was about to start persuading him, but to her surprise, he quickly agreed. Handing her the sword, he told her to pull it out and try to hold it. Not believing her luck, our heroine looked at him carefully, expecting a catch. Fearing that he would change his mind, Veronica quickly got out of bed and drew her sword. Leon said that there is no single way to hold a sword. The grip must constantly change. It can be compared to the flow of water. It will change depending on its impacts. But there are basic concepts, such as when to use the front edge and when to use the back edge. When she asked how she could tell them apart on the sword, he almost cursed, but held back. Afterwards, in a calm tone, pointing to the sword, he explained that the back one was closer to the hand from below. She had a hard time understanding this science by ear, so he came up behind her to show her. This is the blade of the sword. The back of the sword is the part that is next to the hand. Then he said that the side facing the enemy was the front, and she looked at the sword. It all seemed obvious to him, but he felt he had to show her. Swinging his weapon with her, he said that distant enemies must be attacked from the front. Standing behind her, the knight guided her hands along with the sword, slowly cutting through the air. But if Bahamut appeared before her, he advised her to forget about the edges and aim for the heart. He let go of her hands and demanded that she try it on her own now. She took a deep breath, loosened her grip to regain her stance, and sliced through the air. Then she repeated this movement several times, and she did it very well. She wanted to hear his opinion, so she asked him to speak out. Leon saw that her movements were becoming more precise each time, but he remained silent. He didn't want to give her false hope, but he was interested in watching her efforts. A room where it is impossible to determine whether it is day or night, and the sounds of a sword cutting through the air. Sweat was pouring down in streams, and her arms felt like they were about to fall off from the weight. But she was having fun. Sometimes memories write stories deeper than what appears on the surface. Finally, when she turned her head, holding her breath, Leon was looking straight at her. For some reason, at that moment, it seemed to her that she would remember this day for a long time. When she woke up, the girl immediately noticed that she could not hear the crackling of the fire. She thought it was strange, but she didn't want to get up yet. Her body ached a little when she realized that since there was no fire, there was no Leon Berg. She jumped up sharply. She couldn't remember exactly when she fell asleep and didn't hear him leave. She felt sad that he didn't say goodbye, but the unfamiliar voice didn't let her think. The young knight said that if she refused food, there would be consequences. Veronica told him that she hadn't refused. She had just woken up. To his comment that the caretakers didn't know this, she mumbled that there was no need to scold her. But Oscar's answer surprised her, because he said that Leon Berg had entrusted her protection to him, and that even the Pope approved of it. Then she asked that the prisoners also need protection. Then I thought that she still hadn't introduced herself to the person who would be guarding her. Deciding to correct this assumption, she extended her hand and introduced herself as Veronica Schwarzwald. The young knight hesitated for a moment, looking at her hand, before he muttered a name. She realized that he also had a surname, which is given to children who are not recognized by their fathers. Deciding not to dwell on it, she smiled radiantly and got down to business. Veronica asked that since he had come anyway, maybe he could take a look at her stand, and she explained that she had only learned to hold a sword yesterday, so her movements were awkward. Then she added that she was ready to listen to any advice, corrections, everything would be fine. Clearly displeased, he asked if it was Leon Berg who taught her how to wield a sword. Ignoring his tone, she explained that he had only shown her how to hold it, and nothing more. Oscar couldn't help but say that she was a woman, and an unbeliever at that. It dawned on her why the knight was unhappy, but he was fundamentally wrong. She would prove it to him. She replied that she would not deny it. She was indeed a woman, but a believer, and that she went to church and on the ship with her father. But he interrupted her, saying that she was not a believer. He looked at her with a look full of contempt, and when he spoke, it was as if he spat it out. How could a servant of God have such eyes? Veronica felt herself falling into a stupor. She sold her soul to the devil, and now she has merged with him, but believers will not perish. Oscar's contemptuous gaze was directed straight into her reddened eyes. Veronica had never received such a look from anyone in her life. The young knight continued that if it were not for Sir Berg, she would have been subjected to the Inquisition. If she had been a believer, Bahamut would have condemned her to death rather than accept her into his offspring. She had asked herself that question, but she wasn't going to agree now. She said that if this is true, then the monster has more common sense than the Inquisition. Perhaps it would be worth inviting one of them to the Holy See as an inquisitor. Her guard was furious at such speeches and demanded that she stop blaspheming. In a fit of inexplicable self-defense, she screamed that he had started it. A tense silence hung between them. They stared at each other. Our heroine, having thought whether all paladins were like this, decided that it was in vain that she started talking to him. I couldn't even imagine that I would ever consider Leon a good person. Several days passed, and neither of them made any further attempts to start a conversation. Veronica tried to count how many days had passed since Leon had gone to the mountains. She continued her daily training, and the young knight watched silently. It wasn't that he irritated her, it was just that his constant presence weighed on her. Realizing that she was powerless to change the situation, she tried not to notice him. They were in the same room all the time, and when their eyes met, she felt awkward. To distract herself a little, she sometimes began to secretly watch him. No one else visited her, so when there was a knock on the door, Oscar was surprised. They demanded that the door be opened, and the Pope and Commander Mecklenburg arrived for a visit. The Pope's name didn't bother her. Veronica was more focused on the second name. The commander of the Order of the Holy Knights, Albert of Mecklenburg, was almost a legendary figure. There wasn't a single child who didn't listen to stories about him before going to bed. He became a knight at 15 and continued to lead an active life after 50. This man was literally a living legend, so she was intrigued by his visit. She never knew the rules of etiquette, and, not knowing what to do, she awkwardly lowered her head. A deep voice demanded that she raise her eyes, which she did. She looked up nervously and felt a huge shadow looming over her. His imposing figure was exactly what one would imagine a true knight to be. Her attention was drawn to his sharp features. They were colder than anyone else's, but it wasn't this that interested her most, but his red hair with graying. Suddenly, something inside her clicked like the gears of a clock. She couldn't believe it. Veronica's eyes widened. Was she the only one who saw this striking resemblance? While she was studying it, he said that this was definitely a merger with a deity, that she is indeed a fusion, and her eyes are not like normal red eyes. Dad stood a little behind and said that he heard that it was she who merged with the first Bahamut. Then, he asked if there was anything special about her compared to the other mergers. Sir Albert replied only that she retained her sanity, which was unusual. But it seems to be due to the fact that her normal life force is replaced by holy energy. Mecklenburg said thoughtfully that she looked young and asked how old she was. She answered that she was 20, and Dad asked if that meant that her mother had poisoned herself while pregnant in the wasteland. Although Veronica knew it was not her place to ask questions, she couldn't help but ask. When she asked what, Papa laughed good-naturedly and said that she didn't seem to know. When he asked her if she knew who became merged, she glanced at Oscar. Then she replied that, as she had heard, they are people who lack faith. Papa's voice seemed too soft to her when he said that they thought so too. He went on to say that they had seen many mergers over the past 2 years. Among them were pious priests, and even an old woman who had lost her mind from old age. Dad spoke softly, like a beloved grandfather telling an old story. Veronica heard him ask if she wanted to know what they all had in common. Meanwhile, our hero reached Blazon. He stood at the foot of the snow-capped mountains. His path lay to the top, and there, as he assumed, the most difficult things awaited him. The detachment walked along a snowy slope. It became steeper and steeper, so they dismounted. Leon moved away to find a better way forward. But looking into that white distance, he became thoughtful. This girl did not leave his head. He constantly returned to her in his thoughts. He remembered how she looked at him and begged him not to leave her, and his heart ached. After all, he was the same when he was little and begged his mother not to leave him. Leon almost forgot. Or rather, he forced himself to forget. But the memories returned. He watched the woman he loved so much walk away and shouted after her. The knight's strong hand firmly held his small hand and pulled it in the other direction. At that time, he did not yet know that this was only the beginning of the trials that would befall him. Now, a woman is just a non-entity for him. He has long since accustomed himself to this. Leon believed that one person could be sacrificed to save 400 million. If he hadn't saved her, she would have died anyway, so his decision won't change. Whatever happens, if you are afraid to trample a flower, then you won't be able to take a step. Veronica pondered over the Pope's words. What could all the merged ones have in common? But she had no idea, so she cautiously asked what it was. They all visited the temple when the statue lost its head in the desert 20 years ago. Dad continued that the people consumed by Bahamut were the first witnesses. The pilgrims who came to the wasteland that summer, he was there too, and remembers it as if it were yesterday. The disappearance of the statue's head was in itself a bad omen. The priests stopped receiving divine revelations, and there was a feeling that God had disappeared. Veronica thought about the fact that her mother, it turns out, was pregnant at that moment. Julius V asked. Now she understands why he found her. The girl shook her head. But even after listening to everything, our heroine still did not understand the true reason for his visit. He explained that he wanted to understand why Bahamut was leaving those witnesses alive. wants to open their minds and read their thoughts, but the merged ones die too quickly. He added bitterly that he never managed to hear what they were talking about. His voice was quiet, but there was no fear hidden in it. And then an idea struck her. He also witnessed this disaster. He was afraid that the monster might come for him too. As soon as Veronica came to this conclusion, Dad looked at the Knight Commander. Before she could ask her question, Mecklenburg took a step towards her. He reached out and grabbed her by the thin neck. This movement made her think. His strong grip squeezed her windpipe, and she raised both hands, trying to pull him away. Leon said that holy power flows in his blood, but blood is also lost when it is spilled. She realized Mecklenburg was draining her of the holy power that remained from Leon. The girl made another desperate attempt to escape. She didn't want to become a monster. He grabbed her by the neck sharply. Through the tears that clouded her eyes, she peered into the knight's cold face. The last thing that came to her mind was Leon's face as the knight strangled her. Oscar couldn't watch the killing happen, even though it was a purification. That's what he had been taught. He looked at the Knight Commander and thought that he must believe that this was a trial of the unbelieving. There was a quiet knock. The girl fell to the floor, but to everyone's surprise, she was alive. The atmosphere remained tense. Mecklenburg asked the Pope to step back. Suddenly, everyone's expressions changed, and a quiet voice echoed throughout the room. Her voice seemed to pierce their souls. She said that the small sword would be lost. Bahamut, wielding the holy sword, will destroy Kart and steal his glory. The Pope's face turned as pale as death. Veronica continued to curse. Although Oscar was not born in the age of oracles, he recognized this as a prophecy. The prayers and cries of the last days will neither be seen nor heard by God. For he has lost his face. She finished speaking with such prophetic words. She looked straight at Mecklenburg with her reddened eyes, but did not see. Then she fell on her side. The stormy air died down, and silence reigned in the room. A chill ran down Oscar's spine, leaving goosebumps, and the commander reached for his sword. The silence hung for a long time before Papa, with trembling lips, was the first to break it. His voice sounded surprisingly loud for his age, that she was definitely a heretic. He shouted his order to immediately throw this heretic into the torture chambers. In the pitch-black darkness, the flame from the torch flickered brightly. At first, it was just a dot. Veronica, lying on her side, reached for the fire, but her hand fell powerlessly to the floor. She felt her whole body as something aching and painful, especially her neck. She wondered how she was still alive if the holy power had completely disappeared. From time to time, she fell into complete oblivion, but the creaking door brought her back. Having raised herself a little, she listened to a speech about how, surprisingly, she was still alive. Mecklenburg spoke about the fact that when a person loses holy power, he sees hallucinations. Turning to her, he wants to know what she has seen since she came into this room. The demand was simple, but Veronica remained silent, which angered the visitor. He decided that he would beat what he wanted out of her by any means necessary, even if it was by force. The knight, who had been standing at attention, stepped forward, and she looked at him. There was confusion in her eyes, but only for a moment. Everything quickly changed. The sudden impact sent her head flying to the side, leaving her feeling dizzy and in pain. She spat out blood, and the knight demanded that she report to the commander everything she saw. Parting her heavy lips, she hoarsely asked what they wanted from her, and she added that they still wouldn't let her go, even if she told them everything. She thought to herself that Leon left her here because he thought this place was safe. She said out loud that he didn't leave her here to be humiliated like that. And when Leon returns, he will not leave it like this. Then the commander asked about the prophecy. Does she remember the prediction they heard, and repeated it word for word. He added that only 3 people heard it, but it was undoubtedly a prophecy. Anyone who lived in the era of true prophecy 20 years ago would have recognized him. Mecklenburg looked at the girl carefully before speaking again. There are 2 swords in the world called the swords of God. They are twins, Genesis and Apocalypse. Coincidentally, he now has one of them, and he is confident of its fate. Another holy sword, ironically, is currently on reconnaissance in the Blazon Mountains. He should have returned by now, and a lot of time has passed. But there is no news of him. Leon, no! Sir Berg is safe. Her voice wavered as she spoke hurriedly. He noticed that she had now lost her composure, having remained calm after the blow. Mecklenburg's face changed slightly, and he asked what her visions were telling her. There was nothing special in her visions, and she asked to tell what happened to Leon Berg. Sir Albert did not have time to answer her, because the arrival of the knights was announced. The commander said to wait for him. He would soon come and receive Sir Philip. And the girl asked, "Is it really true that no one will be sent even now, when there is a prophecy?" She added that if it came from her lips, then it was necessary to send someone. At the end, she added in a slightly dull voice that Leon doesn't just disappear. Sir Albert smiled and coldly replied that she apparently didn't know him well, explaining that he could run away without warning, but he couldn't die just like that. If it comes to death, he will even devour his comrades, just to survive. On the way out, he ordered that they watch carefully so that the carrier did not die. Wiping away tears of despair, she looked at the broad back of the Holy Knight commander. She thought that he had no right to turn away, because Leon was his own son. Veronica watched Sir Albert's expression closely and became convinced. Leon not only looked like the great warrior, he even adopted his facial expressions. Sitting on the floor, she felt as if the guests had never been there. The only thing that had changed was that now, in a whirlwind of thoughts, she was worried about Leon. Suddenly, she heard the door creak. Her first thought was that he was back. Without realizing it, she even shouted his name. But it was only Oscar. It was only when he handed her a glass of water that she felt a strong thirst. Having thanked him, the girl even tried to count how many days she had not eaten or drunk. The cold water wet her lips and rushed down her throat, and her head gradually cleared. Once she had quenched her thirst, she wanted to ask her most pressing question. She couldn't tell if Oscar would even want to answer her, given their relationship. Gathering her courage, she asked if Sir Leon had returned from his reconnaissance mission in Blessane. Oscar didn't answer her right away. It was painful for him to look at her. She looked terrible. He looked at her frail limbs, which had become withered over the last few days. Then he slowly shook his head and answered dryly that Leon had not yet returned. And he added that he had come because Sir Albert had ordered him to spare her life. "How caring!" she sneered, asking later to come back and torment her again. Oscar reported that the gentleman had gone to Blazon and would not be back anytime soon. She bombarded him with questions about when he finally went to look for Leon. The knight only replied that he would come at every meal and listen to the visions. Veronica, holding Oscar back, asked why Mecklenburg had gone to Blosson. In response, he asked her to express herself respectfully. For her, he was Mr. Mecklenburg. Beaming, she asked if he had left after all, because he was worried about Leon, and also because of the prophecy about the small sword. But the knight asked her not to have any illusions. The answer was that the gentleman left because he appreciated the importance and went personally. Because only Sir Albert is able to protect the sword and this sacred weapon. Like Lord Genesis or Sir Berg's Apocalypse, these swords absorb holy power. Even the barrier that has guarded this city for millennia can be absorbed by them. Oscar didn't want to remind him, but he did, and what Sir Berg did in Tirana. The young knight fell silent, apparently realizing that he had said too much, and quickly ended the conversation. The commander understands the seriousness of the situation and would not have gathered a detachment for Sir Berg's sake. Even if it was his own son, such a question almost escaped her lips. The words froze in her throat, never coming out. But the girl still thought about it. Surely other knights assumed the same thing as she did. But there were no rumors. There were only two options left. Either her assumption was hasty and wrong. Either the commander treated Leon so coldly that no one believed they were related. Veronica saw no point in continuing the conversation. She wouldn't know more anyway. Reflecting on this conversation later, she began to analyze the guard's behavior. She came to the disappointing conclusion that this young man was as lonely as she and Leon. Our heroine was sure that she would die. But day after day, the unbearable thirst went away. The fusion was becoming bearable. She didn't understand why. Because she didn't have holy power. She was interested in how she was different from others. She didn't go crazy and didn't die. But she didn't want to even imagine that she was turning into Bahamut. After countless questions, Veronica opened her eyes and saw another vision. This time, she stood on top of a high mountain, looking down at something below. For the first second, she even wanted to close her eyes so as not to see anything, but she forced herself to keep watching, even though she knew she was being watched. She was really scared. She started to calm herself down, because it was just a vision. When the trembling subsided, our heroine sat quietly for a few more seconds. She told herself that she was not here. She raised her head and looked forward. She had an uneasy feeling about the monsters stomping around. Continuing to look into the distance, her vision focused, and she clearly saw the mountains. There was no doubt. These were definitely the Blasena Mountains. She recognized them from last time. But why did the vision bring her here? Then she heard the sounds of a horn in the distance. Our heroine listened to better determine the direction, and the sound was repeated. The squad of holy knights was far away, but she could clearly see their white armor. Our heroine looked where their gazes were directed and realized what was happening. The Bahamutes didn't just run down to them. They literally fell on the knights' heads. There were some unimaginable numbers of them. No human army could have stood up to them. The wind howled as they fell, headless bodies falling from the sky, hitting the snow. The Bahamutes leapt from the cliffs, almost human-like, falling in a suicidal plunge. The captain of this detachment listened to the report and quickly made the decision to accept the battle. He roared. No one was to retreat. Anyone who tried to escape would fall by his hand. The knights responded with a battle cry, their spirit worthy of being called the army of God. One swing, then another, and with each swing of the blade, hot blood spurted. He felt his gaze piercing him through the thin veil of blood. Leon raised his head, letting the blood pour over him. A lone figure stood at the top, a human figure with a bowed head. But the Bahamutes had no heads. Veronica watched the movement of the original. Its target was Leon. Then, without realizing it, she rushed forward and shouted that it was Leon Berg. She couldn't believe it, but the firstborn turned his head and flashed his eye. Below, Veronica saw him, waiting for the attack and the main battle of life. Our hero assessed his chances with a cool head. He simply had to kill him. Bahamut watched with his red embers, but for some reason, he was in no hurry. Leon could not understand why he stopped. Moreover, he suddenly changed his mind. The Holy Knight simply didn't expect such a turn of events. He gritted his teeth and swung his sword. He shouted angrily at Bahamut on the impregnable peak where he suddenly gathered. Echo repeated several times that he couldn't escape. He would still catch up with him. Suddenly, the cries of the detachment were heard from the rear. He had to find out what was going on. The knight, attacked by the monster, reported that the commander was wounded and help was needed. Someone shouted what to do now, and Leon suddenly made an unexpected decision. He thought that the detachment, having lost its commander, would become confused and they would all be killed. However, what he had been pursuing for so long was now there, on that peak in front of him. But Leon simply couldn't make the same mistake again. He had changed so much. He needs to take command and lead the living out of the senseless slaughter. And no matter how hard it was for him to make such a decision, people were more important. Thinking that he would return to his main mission in life, he ordered the shields to be raised. He ordered to immediately stop the fight and get away from this mountain. The knights were confused. He shouted, "God is with us." The phrase that ignited the heart of the Holy Knight spread through the air. When Apocalypse raised his long blade, the squad immediately stood at attention. In front of the god's sword, the steel blades roared in unison, rising as one. Leon Berg led the squad, 100 hearts burning as one, like a single flame. But he was still tormented by a feeling of guilt for having abandoned the people of Asseldorf back then. He ordered that anyone who fell from above should be cut down, and that they should not be allowed to break formation. The Bahamuts did not pursue the party any further. Leon was not their true prey. Because of his choice, everyone could have died. Just like in Tirana, when his comrades died. Veronica saw Leon safely lead his squad away and shrank from the cold. She thought that it was good that he survived and was taking the divine sword with him. She remembered the prophecy and wondered who she was to foresee the future. Looking the other way, she saw the firstborn slowly walking away. Our heroine, although she saw everything, did not know what was on this monster's mind, what he was planning. However, looking into the distance, she saw a detachment of knights led by Sir Albert. Even from here, she could see his bright red hair, his cold face expressing confidence. It began to dawn on her that Bahamut had been planning to devour this squad all along. The firstborn froze for a second, and then Veronica saw the death of the entire squad. She was in pain. A chill ran through her whole body. She was returning to reality. She muttered something, as if this could change anything. The prophecy had come true. Veronica groaned in the dark room. Oscar thought she might finally die. The Pope ordered that the man who made the ominous prophecy be converted to Christianity. Oscar was at a loss, and His Holiness was already tired of waiting, so he hurried him. I asked him what he was waiting for. Hadn't he said earlier that he would do this for the sake of awakening? Dad asked what he was waiting for. Had he really begun to doubt in the face of God? Oscar, having sworn allegiance, could not disobey the papal order and took up the whip. Ordinary executioners would not have been able to cope. It had to be one of God's knights. The young knight pulled as long as he could, but under Julius's stern gaze, he gave in. Although in his understanding, it looked more like an attack than an appeal. But he had taken an oath, so now he was slapping the back of the insensitive and pure girl. Oscar tried to abstract himself, but his consciousness played a cruel joke on him. He closed his eyes and continued to move his hand up and down, the whistling in his ears becoming unbearable. Memories broke through her desire to forget what he was doing now. He continued to whip, trying to convince himself that this was a righteous cause, that she was just a monster, that she sold her faith to a monster. But he only saw the girl. Her thin back shook with pain. Her clothes tore, and blood spurted out. She bent over, and there were moans. He could only make out one word, Leon's name. He closed his eyes tightly, and once again recalled those determined red eyes. Oscar raised the whip high, and a moment later, it slid limply to the floor. He was sure that she would not survive, so he knelt before the Pope and prayed. "Please stop. Make this stop, Your Holiness. I beg you." He said, "Order me to lay my head on the chopping block, to die in battle, and I will obey. If you don't stop, if you continue, if you go further, it could kill everyone." Dad said he was disappointed in Oscar, and it felt like the ground beneath his feet had cracked. His father's disapproval shook his very being, and he bowed his head even lower. When Veronica opened her clouded eyes with a terrible scream, Oscar rushed towards her. He took a deep breath, and wiping the sweat from his forehead, asked her if she was conscious. He helped her sit down, and then asked again if she could hear him, if she knew who he was. She said what she saw, spoke sluggishly. He felt fear growing inside. Oscar held his breath, her voice hoarse and barely audible unless he concentrated. The girl said that she saw a small sword that needed to be taken and held it in her hands. Or rather, it was a monster who pressed him to his chest like a baby. Bahamut raised it high into the sky for all to see. It was Sir Mecklenburg's sword. Veronica tried to explain in more detail, but she was out of breath and her heart ached terribly.